So good day to all of you and welcome to the launch event of AI and Climate Futures in Asia. My name is Urvashi Aneja and I am the founder and director of Digital Futures Lab. For those who are not very familiar with our work, we are an India-based research organization, and we study and develop insights about the societal impacts of technology transitions in India and other parts of the global south. And through our research, we seek to develop pathways towards equitable, safe, and sustainable digital futures. A few housekeeping announcements before we start. This event is being recorded and will be available publicly on the Digital Futures Lab website, as well as on YouTube and other platforms. The audience members are welcome to use the closed captions option if they have any problems with the audio. And finally, if you have any questions for the panelists or other speakers, please do park them in the chat. We will be collecting questions at the end of the panel discussion, and I will be passing them on to the relevant speaker. Great. So to get started, I'm delighted today to share a project with all of you that we've been working on for over a year. In January last year, with support from the Rockefeller Foundation's Asia Pacific office, we set up a network of leading experts from 9 countries across Asia working at the intersection of AI and climate. I think this, to our knowledge, this is the first such network of its kind in Asia and really brought together an interdisciplinary perspective on the issues at the intersection of climate action and technology. And we will be meeting some of the members of the expert panel today. And together with this expert network, we explored the opportunities, the challenges, and the risks at the intersection of AI and climate action in Asia, zooming in on 3 sectors: on agriculture, energy transitions, and disaster response. As you all know, Asia is facing a unique set of climate challenges, and urgent climate solutions are needed to address the scale and speed at which the climate crisis is hurtling towards Asia. Machine learning and artificial intelligence is expected to play a significant role in addressing the climate crisis. Machine learning can improve our understanding of complex systems, optimize existing systems, and advance scientific research. And multiple new initiatives are underway in the Asian context and globally to support more climate-resilient agriculture, to support clean energy transitions, as well as to support disaster response. However, the use of AI also poses a number of challenges and risks, whether it's around data availability or it's about the distribution of benefits and harms amongst the private sector and most vulnerable communities. And of course, most recently, the environmental impacts of AI technologies have also come to light. As this is a fast and nascent and fast evolving space, traditional social science methodologies are also not adequate in addressing these issues. So to address the issues at the intersection of AI and climate action, we employed foresight and futuring methods to anticipate the likely direction of emerging trends and the likely preferable scenarios that we want to direct these AI and climate trajectories towards. Foresight can be a really important tool in anticipating change, in avoiding harmful technological lock-ins, and in identifying relevant policy pathways to the preferable futures that we want. So in today's discussion, we will explore many of these issues. We'll meet members of the expert panel, and we'll explore what is happening in different countries in the Asian context, as well as give you an overarching picture of the current status quo in the Asian context and where and how we see some of these trajectories unfolding. But before that, we're delighted and honored to have Dr. Amandeep Gill, the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology, to deliver the keynote address. Dr. Gill was appointed by the United Nations Secretary General as his Envoy on Technology in June 2022 and joined the Secretary General's senior leadership in mid-July 2022. A thought leader on digital technology, Mr. Gill has deep knowledge of digital technologies coupled with a solid understanding of how to leverage the digital transformation responsibly and inclusively for progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Before taking up the position as Envoy on Technology, he was the Chief Executive Officer of the International Digital Health and Artificial Intelligence Research Collaborative Project based at the Graduate Institution in Geneva. He was also the executive director and co-lead of the United Nations Secretary General's high-level panel on digital cooperation. And between 2016 and 2018, he was India's ambassador and permanent representative to the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. Mr. Gill, thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure and honor to have you deliver the keynote address. And now I'd like to over to you.
Thank you very much, Urvashi. Thank you for that exceedingly warm and generous introduction. And I want to congratulate you and the Digital Futures Lab, as well as the Rockefeller Foundation, for this thoughtful report and for focusing on an issue at a time of great relevance. And I'll return to this in a second. So in my role as the Secretary General's Technology Envoy, of course, there is a representational aspect, there's an advisory aspect, but there is a practical implementation aspect when it comes to the Secretary General's roadmap on digital cooperation and working towards a global digital compact. This global digital compact is to be adopted at the Summit of the Future in September in New York. So it is a unique opportunity to refresh not only multilateralism, but our shared vision of our digital future, in which obviously data and artificial intelligence are going to play an increasingly important role, and also to refresh our vision of how we should pursue this shared vision, not only as member states of the United Nations, as governments, but also as civil society, academia, the private sector, and other stakeholders, ensuring digital inclusion for all and considering perspectives from both the global south and the global north. So your focus on 9 countries in Asia at different levels of development and your cross-disciplinary approach of focusing on 3 issues that are relevant to climate change and the technology nexus is extremely, extremely valuable. So I will not spend much time on the Global Digital Compact, except to underline that no specific technology can just be looked at from the narrow lens of its application in a particular domain. We have to anchor it in a broader vision, anchor it in a framework of guiding principles. And the draft Global Digital Compact has precisely 10 guiding principles for digital cooperation. And it has to be serving a vision for an inclusive, open, free, and secure digital future. And AI, of course, is a key item on the agenda of the Global Digital Compact. And it's trivial to say these days that it holds immense potential for our economies, our societies, and the planet. It can contribute to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, by supporting productive economy. And increasingly, you see in many of the 9 countries that have been chosen in your report, the digital economy playing a larger role. It can facilitate resource management, policy making, and thus obviously contribute to climate change mitigation and support disaster response efforts. But at the same time, we have to be mindful that the benefits coming from AI innovations are unevenly distributed. And as you rightly pointed out, Urvashi, the risks are also unevenly distributed. The power, the tech economic power that flows from AI is mostly concentrated in the hands of a few large platforms and states. And among the risks, there are risks to human rights, there are risks of bias and exclusion, there are risks to democracy, say through disinformation and the undermining of rule of law. There are obviously risks to the labor market in terms of job displacement and rapid change in the kind of skills that are required. And there are risks to international peace and security through arms races around autonomous weapons systems. So there is a lot to be weighed in pluses and minuses when we look at AI and climate change. So let me just dive into that nexus for a few moments. Obviously, climate change is a global challenge where a collective response is needed, and that response is dependent on a sustainable digital transformation. and the use and the leveraging of these new technologies, precision decision making at scale, for instance. And AI is uniquely positioned to meet this challenge. And maybe I could just give a few examples of how that's so. For instance, it can assign responsibility for climate action to national and subnational governance institutions by creating new and highly granular predictive resources for climate investment. Take storm-related urban flooding. So if you have heat maps of that, you can unlock hyperlocal infrastructure improvement in sewer and drainage systems. Then obviously you can build public open source data and AI systems on top of that to move private sector net zero reporting from a static compliance function to a more dynamic public-facing real-time function to increase trust, transparency, and accountability. And I could go on with such examples. And Urvashi, you also mentioned the aspect of innovation, so lowering the cost of scientific inquiry and rapid prototyping of novel solutions. So there's much that we can leverage in this space. However, we have to be mindful of some caveats. And the first among those is that there are huge structural barriers to the leveraging of these technologies at the scale that's required to meet the climate crisis, not just in terms of scope, but also the diverse needs of different stakeholders in the climate challenge, corporation, government, civil society, and others. And then there are critical shortcomings in the data itself that any kind of AI leveraged climate action would depend on. Bias, representation, and even when you come to the algorithmic development, algorithmic bias, the interpretation bias and allocation harms would have to be considered. So there's a lot to be done in terms of model explainability, trust, ensuring that models are trained on diverse, truly representative data sets, and making sure that the communities who are impacted by climate change have access to AI-generated predictions. So it's not just white-collar stuff, but it is available more widely. And then finally, we have to be mindful of the potential negative impact of AI on climate change. Its energy consumption, its water consumption, its material consumption is rising. Data centers around the world already take up a lot of power. And if we are going in the direction of models that are following the scaling law, that are following addictive uses in the marketplace, then we are obviously, planning holidays and porn and things of that variety, then obviously we are depleting precious resources for precious little. So this is something that we have to keep a hawk's eye on. And what is, to conclude my thoughts, so what's the UN doing about this? We have the Global Digital Compact, as I mentioned, at the Summit of the Future, and there's a high-level advisory body on AI of the Secretary General that's been reflecting on these issues. It issued an interim report, and now it's coming up with a final report shortly with a set of recommendations, including an international scientific panel to keep the implications of these technologies, both risks and opportunities, under watch, a regular policy dialogue, standards, work on standards so that it's not siloed and fragmented, and then critically capacity building and a global fund on AI so that solutions that accelerate progress on the SDGs can find the compute, data, talent, the financial resource that they require, and there can be a collaborative framework. So we are not multiplying the development of models and draining energy all over the world, but we have a collaborative framework that's incentivized. So those are some critical policy recommendations that are entering into the GDC negotiation, and that would hopefully find a place for among the decisions that are taken in September. So I like to congratulate the authors and the effort that the Digital Futures Lab has spent on this very important, very timely topic. And I'm grateful for your attention. Back to you, Urvashi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those very insightful remarks. And in a very short period of time, I think you touched upon so many key points. I think a point that is really going to stay with me is something that you opened with, actually, which is that if we're thinking about AI in this context, we really need to not approach it only through a use case kind of framework, but really look at it from a kind of system lens. I think equally some of the potential that you pointed out around kind of new scientific discovery, lowering the barriers of innovation, are extremely important, especially in the Asia-Pacific context, as well as the flip side on how we address those structural barriers, as well as the diverse needs of different stakeholders. And I think the point around kind of judicious use of AI, given what we know about its environmental harms, and given that the kind of market is pushing towards the larger and larger kind of models, some of which might be very socially beneficial and others which may not, really calls attention to the importance of being judicious in how one invests in AI, how one uses AI, and then obviously the need and importance of capacity strengthening across governments, across civil society, across a whole range of stakeholders, if we're really to responsibly leverage the use of AI. So thank you very much for joining us and for giving those remarks. And we really appreciate you taking time out of what would be, I'm sure, a very, very busy schedule. So thank you again. I'd now like to invite Deepali Khanna, the Vice President, the head of the Rockefeller Foundation's Asia Regional Office, to share a few reflections on the project and the rationale for the Rockefeller Foundation engaging in these issues. As the head of the Rockefeller Foundation's Asia Regional Office, Deepali Khanna oversees efforts to amplify the Foundation's impact and initiatives to make opportunities universal and sustainable. She leads efforts to build and sustain networks with different institutions, leveraging financing and collaborations, innovative grants, thought leadership, and information on trends driving the Asian continent's development. Deepali was leading engagement with India's G20 presidency to advance global economic equity, public health, clean energy, and sustainable food systems. She has also served as co-chair of the G20 India Business Task Force on Finance, the G7 Japan Think 7 Task Force on Development and Economic Prosperity. Currently in the G20 Brazil presidency, she's serving on the T7 Task Force on Finance and Infrastructure. Deepali, thank you so much for joining us and for taking time out of your busy schedule. And of course, thank you to the Rockefeller Foundation for their support in conceptualizing and bringing to life this project. Over to you, Deepali.
Thank you, Urvashi. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. What an exciting start to the event with Mr. Amandeep Gill's inspiring remarks. I've always found him to be extremely insightful, and today was no different. I'm glad that you could join us in spite of your hectic schedule. It is truly an honor to address this esteemed gathering on a topic that is central to the Rockefeller Foundation's mission, climate action. Since 1913, the Rockefeller Foundation has been dedicated to promoting the well-being of humanity around the world. Our approach to climate action is anchored in the belief that progress must be inclusive and equitable. Today, we are accelerating transformations in our energy, food, health, and finance systems to avert the perils of climate change while making new progress. This includes investing $1 billion over the next 5 years to find and scale solutions that advance opportunity and reverse the climate crisis. The AI plus Climate Futures in Asia project, supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, examines the opportunities, risks, and challenges at the intersection of AI and climate action in Asia. Asia faces unique climate challenges, being the world's most disaster-prone region with high exposure to natural disasters, severe food insecurity, and increasing health issues due to rising temperatures. The rationale behind the AI plus Climate Futures in Asia project is clear. Artificial intelligence has the potential to revolutionize our approach to climate change. By leveraging AI, we can analyze vast amounts of data, predict climate patterns, and develop targeted interventions that are both efficient and effective. However, it's crucial to recognize the diverse readiness levels across Asia, from advanced AI ecosystems in Singapore and China to nascent stages in countries like Bangladesh. This calls for tailored strategies based on each country's unique circumstances. In our own work, we are actively exploring the potential of leveraging AI across various sectors. In partnership with Digital Green, we are utilizing large language models to enhance farmer advisories, empowering them with precise and timely information. The Periodic Table of Food Initiative has compiled one of the most exhaustive data sets on the biochemical makeup and functions of active food ingredients, paving the way for groundbreaking advancements in food and health. Additionally, we're investigating how AI can facilitate the integration of renewable energy into the electricity grid, optimizing energy use and efficiency. Furthermore, we're exploring the use of non-traditional data to predict disease outbreaks, enabling health systems to prepare and respond more effectively. The criticality of the AI-climate intersection for Asia cannot be overstated. Asia's rapidly growing economies and diverse climate presents both a challenge and an opportunity. AI can provide the tools needed to develop customized solutions that address local needs while contributing to global climate goals. For example, AI-driven climate action strategies in agriculture must account for varying agroclimatic zones and resource availability, ensuring that interventions are relevant and impactful. Moreover, addressing climate challenges in Asia requires, as we heard, interdisciplinary collaboration. Partnerships among data scientists, climate scientists, local stakeholders, and policymakers are critical for developing effective AI-driven climate solutions that are context-specific and inclusive. Additionally, shifting from top-down data collection approaches to bottom-up strategies that prioritize local needs and incorporate traditional knowledge can lead to more effective and sustainable AI solutions. The role of philanthropy and development organizations is critical in developing responsible AI for climate action. By supporting foundational research, pilot projects, and community-driven initiatives, we can unlock the potential of AI to address climate challenges in Asia. This ensures that AI interventions are equitable, inclusive, and sustainable. In conclusion, the Rockefeller Foundation is dedicated to driving climate action through innovative approaches like the AI plus Climate Futures in Asia project. By harnessing the power of AI, we can create a sustainable and resilient future for Asia and beyond. I would like to share the resources developed during this year-long exercise with you, and also take this opportunity to thank the expert network. Without their nuanced regional understanding, this project would not have been possible. Last not but least, my heartfelt congratulations and gratitude to Urvashi and the entire Digital Future Labs team for their relentless support and commitment. Thank you so much, and I really look forward to the rest of the event.
Thank you, Deepali. I thank you for sharing your insights and the work that the Rockefeller Foundation is doing. I think the work that you're doing on the periodic table, the non-traditional data on disease outbreaks, all of these sound like extremely promising initiatives in the Asia-Pacific context. And I really appreciate the call out that you made to kind of context-specific strategies, tailored strategies for local contexts, the importance of combining top-down and bottom-up approaches, prioritizing bottom-up approaches, and really fostering a space for interdisciplinary collaboration. So thank you again for your support on this project and for trusting us as we embarked on this mission over the past year to try and bring together a wide range of expertise and scholars to deliberate this topic. Once again, thank you to both of you, Mr. Gill and to Deepali. We'd now like to show you a short video, the one that Deepali was mentioning, which will run you through the knowledge products that have been produced through this project and also the ways in which you can access them. So if I can just ask someone from the DFL team to please play the video. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the launch of AI plus Climate Futures in Asia. With the support of the Rockefeller Foundation, we are very excited to be presenting all the outcomes of this project put together on our website, climateai.asia. I will give you an overview into the website for you to explore and read at your own time later. We begin with the homepage that introduces the project and our expert network to you. You can scroll down and read through it and click on the links here to learn more about our expert network. The layout has been designed with the intention of ensuring that all information is easy to access and read. All pages are organized in the top header for easy navigation. Let's go to current landscape. This page provides an overview of the landscape report. The report assessed AI maturity levels across the 9 countries, explored use cases in 3 domains, and highlighted key challenges and risks of the space. Let's now move on to future scenarios. Visit this page to read the foresight briefs and view some engaging illustrations. The 2 briefs showcase speculative scenarios on the future of climate data governance and AI in agriculture in Asia, set in the year 2035. For ease of access, you will see that we have also put together the summary takeaways on the pages for visitors who may not have the time to go through a report but can still get a snapshot of the conversation. We now move on to expert briefs. On this page, we curate the thought-provoking issue and country briefs authored by the expert network, highlighting key opportunity areas and challenges at the intersection of AI and climate change in Asia. Coming to recommendations. This page summarizes the pathways for global development organizations and philanthropic foundations to support responsible AI and safe and trustworthy digital public goods for climate action. Next up, we have climate dialogues. We spoke to experts around the world, facilitated public discourse, and engaged in policy conversations. Visit this page for lightning talks, panel discussions, and op-eds on AI and climate futures in Asia. Last but not the least, the website also offers you our signals database. When you click on that, you can access the entirety of signals categorized and put together under this project. The signals, which are early signs of change, served as markers of directionality for the scenario building exercises. As we've seen, climateai.asia offers a wealth of valuable resources for anyone engaged with or wanting to engage with the intersection of AI and climate futures in Asia. With the help of our expert network, it has been a deeply fulfilling year of delving into the many layers of AI and climate in Asia, especially bringing up the unique context of the region. Here are more details about us. We hope that this website serves as a great resource for you. Make sure to visit climateai.asia and bookmark it to continue reading. To keep in touch with our work and continued updates on the project from DFL, make sure to sign up for our newsletter, as well as connect with us on LinkedIn, X, or Instagram. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A chat.
Thank you. I hope that that video served as some kind of teaser or warm-up to entice you to visit the website and go through the resources that we have. As you would have seen, there is a very wide range of resources, including a landscape report, foresight briefs, as well as policy briefs. So please do have a look and do share it amongst your networks as well. We'll be posting the information in the chat, as well as you can find it on our social media handles and on our website as well. And so if that was a teaser, we now have an opportunity to actually get into some of these issues a little bit more. more and also meet 4 of the members of our expert network. So now we turn to the panel discussion part of this event. Again, if you have any questions for the panelists, I request you to please park them in the chat, and we'll have about 15 minutes towards the end of the session for Q&A. Great. So like I said, we have 4 members of our expert network here with us today. We have Aaditeshwar Seth, who's a professor at IIT Delhi. He's a professor at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering and is the co-founder of the social technology enterprise Grambani. He's passionate about building appropriate technologies and participatory tools that can empower marginalized and oppressed communities to collectivize and voice themselves. And he's authored the book, Technology and Disempowerment, A Call to Technologists, which if some of you haven't read, I could not recommend highly enough. We also have with us today Veerappan, who is the CEO of Sustainable Living Lab, which is a sustainability consulting firm with operations in Singapore, Indonesia, India, and the US. His professional experience spans the domains of sustainability, foresight, corporate innovation, and AI skilling. And he serves as the co-chair of the Climate Action 5G Alliance and as an EXCO member of the the 5G Tech Sustainability Steering Committee. In 2014, he co-founded a community-based initiative called Repair to tackle the buy and throw away culture in Singapore. I'm sure we'd have a lot to learn just on that alone, Veerappan, but we might pick up that conversation on a separate event. We also have with us today Neth, who is the Asia Director of the ETC Group. The ETC Group on Erosion, Technology and Concentration, which is an international civil society organization that monitors the impacts of new and emerging technologies on marginalized communities, tracks corporate concentration and governance in food and agriculture, and investigates erosion of biodiversity. She's a researcher who has done in-depth analysis and published work on various issues in agriculture, plant genetic resources, new technologies, and climate change in developing countries, particularly in Southeast Asia. We also have with us Tien, who is the founding partner of Earth VC, which is a global venture capital firm investing in high growth, scaling stage startups with deep tech or digital solutions that have the potential to decarbonize emerging Asia. Tien holds a master's degree in business strategy from the University College Dublin under a full fellowship by the Irish government, and he's been working in the VC industry in Ireland for a number of years. So thank you all of us for joining us. As you can see, we have a wide range of expertise and a very interdisciplinary set of inputs for you today. So I will start with a set of opening questions to the panelists, followed up by a follow-up question. And panelists, please also feel free to respond and react to each other. I think our intention is really to keep this as conversational as possible, while of course showcasing the wonderful work that you have done as part of this project. So Adi, if it's okay, I might start with you. So you have written this piece for the AI and Climate Futures project, which examines 3 areas where environmental health and livelihoods meet around forest health, groundwater management, and flood management. So across these 3 domains, could you tell us a little bit about what potential you see for AI-based tools, specifically in helping communities make decisions about how they manage their own natural resources and their own environments?
Yeah, thanks, Urvashi, and thanks to Amandeep and Deepali for such fantastic remarks. And of course, congratulations to the entire team for putting all this report together. It was a great experience being associated with the project. So essentially, let me begin with saying that the standpoint with which we've been approaching this whole area has been that pretty much, like what the speaker said, that AI, of course, holds a lot of potential, right? But a lot of the benefits arising from it, of who it empowers or who it potentially disempowers, lies in who the solutions are designed for, who is the intended user for some of these solutions. And in our work, we've always put the community at the center. So for example, if we talk about forests, then we've been thinking that what sort of tools, AI-enabled tools, can enable communities to conserve their forests in a better way. So for example, there are very relevant traditional practices which communities follow, like they do rotational harvesting in the forest, that if they need to harvest firewood and so on, then they would do it from one part of the forest. Next year, they move to a different part of the forest. Next year, they move to a different part, so that it leaves the forest opportunity to rejuvenate. But with, increasing aspirations and increasing pressure on natural resources, many traditional communities are also not following these kind of practices. So this becomes an opportunity that now, if we can actually observe some of this through satellite data, if we can put this in front of the people themselves, right, then it becomes a data-driven way to trigger a conversation in the community that see, this patch of forest, we did leave it vacant and untouched, and it has rejuvenated, and this other part, right? So these are, use cases that emerge from our own conversations with forest protection committees of challenges that they face in convincing the rest of the community members to continue to follow some of these norms for forest governance. So right, so these are some ideas, right? And very similarly, when it comes to groundwater, right? So here again, we are living in a world where there is increasing commercialization of agriculture, increasing aspiration, right, for economic mobility, and especially in India, where most of the country has been under rain-fed irrigation. So groundwater irrigation, especially through bore wells, in one way was very empowering, because many farmers who did not have access to canal networks or were downstream in canals, they were able to use bore wells and go on to double cropping, triple cropping, move to horticulture, and so on. Right, cheap electricity, free electricity also helped, and number of bore wells have, just gone through the roof. But what it has led to in so many parts is very severe groundwater depletion, which has so many other problems, right? Because equity issues also, it harms smallholder farmers who are reliant, who don't have bore wells or can't afford them, and so on. So again, these are right, commons resources, which again, we need to get conversations going in the community about, right, what's the status. Tools can also help figure out, right, what are good recharge areas, what are good discharge areas, where should some rainwater harvesting systems be planned, and so on, right? So there's ample opportunity for the technology, but it needs to be deployed for use cases which can also collectivize the rest of the community and enable, move towards a more sustainable future in general. Same with flooding. So I mean, I'll stop, but you get the you get the thread. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think those are such evocative examples in some sense, right? Because I think what really stands out in what you're saying to me is that what we need is AI tools that can help communities make better decisions about what they would like to do, not necessarily be using the AI as imposing the solution in itself, but creating the data points or creating the kind of demonstration effect that then allows communities to kind of take charge of what they might want to do in that context. And I think the other thing that really strikes me about the examples that you're mentioning is that in some sense, they seem to be about kind of, you said it best, but like kind of common resources, preserving the commons and thinking about this from a commons perspective rather than the gains to an individual farmer, for an example, which is often how AI tools, like especially around precision farming, etc., are at least marketed, that, the gains will be at an individual farming level and then by default at a kind of collective level. But here your starting point is in some sense that how do we kind of preserve those common resources? So I think just a follow-up question that I have based on what you're saying, I think the question is really like, how do we scale some of these things, some of these kind of initiatives, or some of these community-based tool building that you and your partners are doing at IIT Delhi? Like, what are some of the challenges that you might experience, and what would it take to kind of make this the more standard way, let's say, of approaching the intersection of AI and climate action?
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, that's super relevant, right? I mean, I think if, we can agree on some underlying principles of how to deal with climate change. And by we, I mean the broader network of stakeholders, including governments, including corporates, and everyone. Then I think that becomes one way to start shaping different programs, right? Now, these could be, so for example, NREGA, right, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme in India, that is specifically meant to finance many of these kind of solutions, right? Farm ponds for groundwater recharge and restoration activities in forests, outside forests, and so on. And that's one way to do it, right? And if this becomes an underlying principle, then we know that the way the NREGA architecture is, right, if it's made demand driven, if the right kind of processes are put into place for such tools to be put in the hands of communities, and through that for the demands to come in and get funded, then that becomes one way, right? Same, if we want to leverage market instruments like carbon credits. So again, right, rather than have carbon credits being rolled out through project developers who then scout around for a large network of farmers who can do various activities, if these again become community centric, right? And that communities come forth, they build their own plans, and these are put forward for advance funding or whichever retroactive funding, whichever be the means. Then I think that's one way. So broadly, the whole point is that if some of these underlying principles, and exactly like you said, right, if commons-based thinking becomes an underlying principle through which all of us start thinking, then I think it automatically leads to the solution approach that we're talking about. I mean, that's one way to think about it.
I think that resonates also with the remarks made by Mr. Amandeep Gill in his opening remarks, right, about kind of not thinking about this from a use case approach, but instead thinking about a core set of principles. And I'm hearing some of that also in what you're saying, in that, we need that kind of broader theory of change on how we're going to be addressing climate action. And then AI needs to kind of fit into that theory of change, rather than us having like a laundry list of use cases and kind of hoping that if you stitch them all together, we will have kind of positive climate action.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, AI is just a tool which will always ride on some principles, right? If there's no principles, it'll just go in some random direction.
Yeah, exactly. Veerappan, maybe I can bring you in here if you're on the...
Yeah, I'm there.
Call. Yes, you're here. So you've written this, wonderful paper for us on the context in Singapore. And Singapore is one of the most advanced countries in the Asian context in terms of using AI for climate action, and of course, in many other domains as well. And I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit about what some of the enablers are in the Singapore context, in terms of the progress that we have seen in the Singapore context, as well as the speed of that change, and whether you might want to also reflect a little bit on what Aaditeshwar is saying about the importance of kind of thinking of this bottom up as well. But of course, government and regulation has a very strong role to play, especially if we want to move fast and move in a more kind of whole of society and in a comprehensive way. So we'd love to get your reflections on the Singapore context.
Sure. So, I mean, I think Singapore should be seen as a city, ultimately, right? City-state. So I think we look at it in terms of what's applicable to other cities as well. So I think in Singapore's context, a few things generally applies, right? Firstly is that, the city's legitimacy revolves on its ability to provide economic opportunities for its citizens. It revolves on its ability to provide safety and security for its citizens, and also enables them to reach their aspirations and so on. So that's the foundational approach. So any new technology, any new initiative, any new approach, I mean, even in the past when data science was a big thing, when IoT was a big thing, and now AI is a big thing, I think the approach has always been somewhat similar for any new technology. It was basically how to sort of use technology in a manner that helps to advance some of these larger goals. So when Singapore got into the AI space, frankly, the thinking at least was that we are behind. Because at that point in time, the US and China and several other countries had actually gone very much further ahead. And so the thinking at least, what was publicly stated at least, is that maybe let's not try to compete at the front end of everything, but try to build the infrastructure which serves as a good foundation for subsequent growth. So what does good infrastructure mean? What does foundation mean in this context? So basically, one of the things is that everyone talks about government data, right? And how much data the government collects. Now, in Singapore as well, the government does collect a lot of data, but for a long time, that remained unusable. It remained unusable because ministries would not exchange information because there wasn't a common data exchange platform, neither was there the infrastructure. The first order of business was to make sure that basically between government departments, they had a way to address their concerns around privacy, sounds, departments' own boundaries, yet exchange useful information with each other. And this is within the government itself. Right? I think so that was one of the steps, like how do you make data transfers possible? The second thing was also how do you generally improve the knowledge around what AI is, what it can do, what it can't do. So we look at it from a funnel system. At one end, you basically want people to have a broad awareness and knowledge about it. At the other end, you want people to be experts and specialists as well. Right? So you're going to have different garden variety of programs, I would say, right? Everything that targets a very generalized knowledge building, all the way to something that focuses on building experts. Now, an interesting expert program that they started was that, they found that while this was very new technology, people were basically at that point, I'm talking about 2018, 2019, 2020 period, people were actually unwilling to stake their career on this because it's an emerging area and not kind of sure where it would go. Right? So it would probably, what they did was to de-risk it by saying that we're going to have an apprenticeship program, and this apprenticeship program involves the government paying a stipend, right, to people who are going to switch into this career, so that while you're exploring the switch in this career, and it's a competitive process, of course, not everyone gets the stipend, but while you are doing that, you get a stipend and you don't have to worry about basically making income and so on and so forth. So you can even allow people who are in a mid-career stage, not just early career, but mid-career stage as well, to switch into this industry and make something for themselves. Another things that they did was basically to enable organizations to embed AI capacity and capability within them. They started basically offering schemes in which they would match AI talent with organizational needs. They also brought up problem statements from the government out, and again got talents to work on those things. So there's a lot of bridging work involved, I would say. So you want to actually build the data infrastructure, you want to build the connections, you want to build the general knowledge and awareness. Now, this foundation is what underpins anything that we do subsequently. And so, the goal is not here to be the top AI nation or anything of the sort, nor make the fastest chips, nor do all these things. But ultimately, is how does it serve the purpose of providing economic, physical security, and as well as the ability of people to meet their aspirations. And that's the way any new technology, not just AI, is generally taken in Singapore context.
Thanks for that. And I think the really important point that you're making is really about thinking about that kind of foundational infrastructure. So I think very often, in tech policy or in tech conversations, we use the terminology of leapfrogging. But in some sense, what you're saying and what I'm taking away from that is that we can't leapfrog some of these kind of foundational steps that we want to build. So if we don't build that capacity and we don't do that bridging work early enough and set those foundations, then it's very hard to kind of dial it back later and kind of fix it once it's already out in the wild or it's already gotten its own momentum. I was also wondering, and this is slightly diverting from your paper, so feel free to deflect the question or answer it creatively. But I was also wondering, given the kind of talent that we see in Singapore, given the kind of policy focus we see in Singapore on AI, both in terms of talent and the kind of foundational digital infrastructure, etc., is there already thinking that you're seeing emerging on how Singapore might manage AI's climate impacts? Again, given that it's, like you're saying, like a city in some sense, the stakes are also quite high or different, at least in the Singapore context. And I know there's been some back and forth around kind of data centers, etc. So any thoughts on that or anything that you can share on how Singapore is thinking on the flip side of this conversation would be very helpful.
Sure. So the biggest concern for us has been energy use. Singapore basically imports all its energy. we don't have a natural energy source. We basically import it by burning. We don't burn coal in Singapore, we burn oil and gas. But still, it's non-renewable energy. And we've also, Singapore as a country is at the confluence of multiple underground cables, internet cables. And so there are many, many data centers in Singapore. And in fact, at a certain point in time, Singapore put a moratorium on data centers simply because the energy usage was extremely high, right? And with AI as well, that's also been creeping up quite a fair bit. So tariffs have gone up in Singapore, and tariffs are going up regularly, in fact, right? And there's, of course, pushback from the government, pushing on businesses and so on. But we generally have an approach saying that, we are working with a resource that we are importing in the first place. You can't just go on using it willy-nilly, right? There's got to be a limit to these things. So in that regard, what has happened is that due to the moratorium, what has emerged from that is the Singapore's come up with some other new requirements for energy efficiency of data centers. Now that has actually led initially to a drop in data centers. So some data centers are saying that, hey, we're not going to set up in Singapore anymore. It is not really a conducive environment. Let's go to Indonesia. Let's go to Malaysia, right? Just across the border. Let's go to maybe Vietnam or Thailand and set up over there instead. And while this is potentially alarming at some level, the government's approach, at least what they have stated publicly, is that it's okay for data centers of certain varieties to go over there, right? Because we basically want to, as in Singapore will always have data centers, but we want to focus on the higher end or higher value data centers, the ones that are processing more complex information and so on. Because the reason is that when we talk about AI processing, not all AI processing is the same, right? So there is basic processing required for training models, there's processing required for inferencing, and there's a sliding scale of requirements in this, right? So the idea at least is to take on AI workloads that are more valuable, yet less energy intensive. So not all AI workloads are seen as being equal. And so the thinking has to be to move to data centers that are able to do specific AI workloads that are cost and energy efficient and also drives a lot of value in the Singapore context.
Right. That's really fascinating. It throws up like an image in my mind of also like the kind of IT value chain, right? Where certain parts of the kind of IT value chain are done in certain countries because there is the talent availability or low cost labor, etc. And the how unequal value is spread across the kind of IT industry at a global level. And I wonder if there's something in what you're saying that is also a sign of things to come with regard to like the location of data centers and where that kind of high value processing happens. Is it in countries that it can have the talent, have the infrastructure, and does the low value processing then get pushed to other countries which may not be as competitive, and what the implications might be from a climate perspective? I think that's a really interesting direction to look into. And Neth, maybe that's a really good moment to bring you in here into the conversation. Your brief looked at the use of digital technologies and digitalization in the agricultural sector. And I think one of the points that came across to me very strongly when reading your brief is that, that benefits and harms are not going to be equally distributed, at least if we continue business as usual or if the kind of status quo continues. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that. What do you see happening in the Philippine context? How do you see this distribution of benefits and harms? And of course, any reflections you might have on the comments made by the previous two speakers, because I think in some way, though from different directions, they do touch upon some of the issues that you've raised in your brief as well.
Thank you, Urvashi. But before I go into my answer to your question, because I don't want to forget this and I want to engage Veerappan. I actually because he said that one of the main concern in Singapore about data centers is energy. But of course, we also have to look into water because Singapore, I think, imports most of its water, if not all, or probably processes it from toilet water.
Maybe I want to jump in there, right? So Singapore moved to a model where we are recycling most of the water that we have. So it used to be a big security problem importing too much water. but we are steadily moved towards a model where we are self-reliant in water. So that has definitely changed in the last 10 years from water policy standpoint. Just wanted to just inform.
Is that counted in the energy consumption of data centers? The energy that you use to recycle and process water. So those are the things that I'd like to put in before I respond.
Sure.
Also, another thing about it would be interesting to know about data efficient AGI processing, because I think I've read tons of articles on this. Like even the guru of them all would say you need quantum energy to be able to supply the energy requirements. So no, just to put that before and also to respond to Urvashi's challenge that we should be more conversational. So yeah. About the question on yes, I think that was very clear in my commentary on how agricultural digitalization is being promoted and deployed in the Philippines, that distribution of benefits is definitely not going to be equal. And I think it's not a surprise. It's definitely not a surprise that those who are left behind in terms of the benefits in previous technological interventions are the same ones who are expected to be left behind. No, because if you actually just put in or promote, parachute another layer of technological innovation in agriculture without addressing the structural problems like access to resources, also wealth distribution, basic infrastructures that are fundamental when you're discussing who benefits and who loses. You will be repeating the same problem. We're actually seeing that emerging in the discussion of agricultural digitalization, or even prior to that, agricultural mechanization. Think access to AI or digital enabled technologies by small scale farmers and fisher folks remains a critical issue. In a country like the Philippines, where poverty incidence among farmers and fisher folks is at around 30% compared to the national rate of 18.1%, no? Who can afford AI-enabled digital technologies and services would actually determine who will benefit from the advantages and potentials offered by these technologies. Connectivity is one clear issue, or access to digital infrastructures, even to basic internet connection. If we're talking of digitalization, it actually critically determines access to AI-enabled digital tools and services. Some people will probably say that, okay, there's Elon Musk providing Starlink, but that's not free. I've been to some communities where actually resorts of politicians are the ones who benefit from Starlink because they can afford it, but the farmers, the small-scale farmers and fisher folks around don't have access to that, no, and wouldn't even have the capacity to do that. And in the case of the Philippines, there is actually a wide urban-rural disparity in internet connectivity, no? With only a little above 22% of households in rural areas actually have access to the internet, compared to twice that amount of households in urban areas. That disparity could be far wider across income groups in rural areas, with smallholders, subsistence farmers, tenants, agricultural workers having much less connectivity than farmers who have larger landholding, which are not captured in official statistics because our statistics are not that granular enough. So similar disparity could also be expected on connectivity among rural women compared to men and across income groups. I think that the fact that Philippines has among the slowest internet speed globally, that's why we could not even and I think when our friend mentioned the alternative locations in Southeast Asia for data centers, it's not too obvious that Philippines is not part of those options. We were actually commenting that a few months ago, all of the CEOs who were of big tech who were in Southeast Asia jumping from one country to another actually skipped the Philippines because of many issues. I think capacity, we have overflowing. Like Vietnam would actually just hire Filipino software or data scientists for the data centers that Apple or Microsoft would build there, but these companies would not build data centers in the Philippines because of issues like unstable power sources, also all these disputes on water sources, land, etc., and of course the very unstable political environment here. So also we could see, in the trends that I've outlined in terms of deployment of agricultural digitalization in the Philippines in partnership with Philippine government agencies, the motivation to penetrate potential smartphone users in rural and urban areas explains why most government programs on digital apps and services and are working with and agtech counterparts are actually collaborating with 1-2 dominant telecom providers in the country, one of which also owns data centers, which are not under big tech. Such commercial push, however, will largely depend on the density of potential users in identified service areas. And we've also seen, like in terms of the patterns and also the focus and priority of programs on AI-enabled decision-making tools in food and agriculture in the Philippines, that there is actually practically no information available in the website of government agencies involved in terms of the deployment of these technologies on where the data that they collect are stored and processed, whether there are agreements on data ownership between government agencies and commercial provider, and also there is this gaping hole just acknowledged by Philippine government officials that these are not covered in the country's data protection regulations. So we have even a big hole in terms of policy protection, also regulatory framework around this. And lastly, none of these digital solutions are likely to address issues in climate change. Actually, it is really striking that most of these programs on AI-enabled decision-making tools that are deployed in the Philippines, whether by government and also by agtech, AI in partnership with telephone companies, actually most of them actually involve continuous reliance on agrochemicals and synthetic fertilizers. Some of them, the bigger one, or widely promoted ones, actually are in part with either seed companies or agricultural, particularly chemical-based inputs, and also the reliance on long value chain, which are contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. So of course, there's very little discussion on environmental and climate footprints at this point. There's still this illusion and delusion that all of these AI tools will actually come from trees, and very little discussion that all of this actually involve extraction of critical minerals for production of batteries, of course, the operation of all these digital technologies, of course, water consumption and land competition around the operation of data centers that store and process data collected from farmers and their farms. So yeah, I think these are the things that I have emphasized on why, like really supporting the thesis that at this point, how we're seeing the deployment of agricultural digitalization or machine learning decision-making tools in food and agriculture, rural sector are not going to correct or address the persistent inequalities in terms of benefits arising from new innovations.
Thank you. Thank you, Ned. I think you provide a really kind of grounded analysis, right? Unless we also, that AI is not just happening in a vacuum, it's happening in a context that is already deeply unequal, where there's a number of kind of structural injustices, and AI is entering into that ecosystem. I think one of the points that really struck with me from your paper was something in some sense that is really fundamental, right? That what is the, and I think Adi also touched upon it in his remarks, in some senses, like, what is the climate science on which we are basing these AI solutions, right? Like, until we get that climate science right, in some sense, there's a high risk that the AI solutions we develop only reproduce the status quo. And so I hear that from the point that you're making, that, none of these issues are likely to address the issue of climate change if these agricultural advisories, for an example, lead farmers towards certain practices practices using fertilizers or contribute to a growing value chains, so on and so forth. So I think that's really key, that we can't just, again, think of it only from the AI end, but what is the science that is shaping the production of these AI interventions. I wanted to ask you a follow-up question, kind of picking up a little bit on a point that was made earlier about that Adi was making on how we need to put kind of communities at the center and create tools that expand their decision-making power. And you mentioned the issue of digital infrastructure and access. Are there other aspects that you think would be relevant to realize the kind of vision that Adi is sharing on how AI might be used for natural resource management beyond access to infrastructure?
Yeah, I think I actually forgot to emphasize what Adi said earlier, that the only way we can see right now for AI-enabled, machine learning-enabled decision-making tools to be useful for communities and also attempt not to address the inequalities in terms of access to resources, also using these tools to be able to empower communities to economically and also politically, is for the solution not to be parachuted from the sky. And also I think that the challenging that all these AI tools will be useful across communities, that it's a one size fits all. Of course, we know that in technological fixes, one size fits all is really the wrong way to go, and we keep on repeating that wrong way of going, unfortunately. And there are attempts, for example, in the communities that we partner with in Mindanao, in organizations, there are actually efforts on the part of communities, to explore ways on how can you make this or digitalization, in particular, useful for communities without losing their control and power over data, over decisions, and all that. And there are efforts, for example, to reach out to some like-minded startups to develop not just the app, for example, to be able to link markets with farmers with markets, but also other applications in terms of decision making. And there are also barriers, in terms of infrastructure. Yes, digital public infrastructure, the public infrastructure in particular, because more and more the public infrastructures, the digital public infrastructure, is actually taken over by private interest. Much of but then there is very little acknowledgement that the backbone of those now privately controlled infrastructures were actually built on the backs of public taxpayers money and all that. So I think there is, when the discussions on digital public infrastructure, there's a lot of convoluted ideas that are actually brought into that, but also missing the point that a lot of this private sector involvement in digital infrastructures are actually building on the backs of infrastructures built from taxpayers' money, and also the fact that with all this pressure to go into digitalization and also prioritizing digitalization as a tool, there are also a lot of basic in the case of the Philippines, services that are actually being left out, that are actually deprived of resources. So like everyone is going into digital education, digital literacy, when the fact that those who are left behind, even in the city where I live, here in Davao, there are actually areas here without electricity in indigenous communities. Much more, what would they talk about in terms of access to digital to digital tools? So I think these are we have to take this on board, because every time we raise this, they will say, of course, governments have to prioritize public services, basic public services like education and health. But in reality, that's not what's happening. It's actually there's actually a lot of redirection of resources, because governments want to to prove that they're actually that through digitalization they can actually what's the term that you use, pole vault in terms of increasing literacy, also increasing health services, but at the same time neglecting basic services that are owed to citizens. So I think we have to look at that together. I don't know if I answered your question, Urvashi. I wasn't even sure if I actually captured, the essence of the question.
I think
So,
you did, and you shared a lot of additional insights as well. So we got more than what we'd bargained for. So thank you for those comments, Net. Last and definitely not least, I want to bring Tien into this conversation. Tien, what do you see? What are some of the sectors where you see the biggest investment currently, and what are some of the sectors where you see some gaps? And just listening to what the previous participants have also said around the need for foundational infrastructure, the point that Veerappan was making, the need for community participation, the need for regulation, like Net was pointing out. So are some of these issues also on the kind of investor mindset or like mind frame as they're thinking about investment, and how do we fill those kind of financing gaps, given also what the previous participants have said?
Yeah, thanks, Urvashi. And yeah, when I look at the video, first of all, thank you very much for such a great job, and thanks all the guys together with me for the whole year we have conducted. Now we look at the website. I don't know that how much time that we have engaged in those materials. It's so detailed, and it's so there's a lot of work, and I just let other audiences understand that we also have some fun then. Not really just work in. We did have some fun when we try to tackle with those issues. It's a very complex and important issue, climate change and AI. From the point of view of an investor, we have been invested in AI before it's become trendy. So AI have been applied into the climate change, and at RVC, we just invested in climate tech solution. So for example, a company that we invested in Finland, Kuva Space, they do hyperspectral camera and fly it to the space. And we already got 3 satellites on the space. Look at that. Normally, it's just a deep tech company with satellite technology, things like that. But the brand of the whole thing is actually their AI and machine learning system. So the thing that they protect the most is actually AI then and their algorithm, because whatever data that we collect on the Earth need to be analyzed with those algorithms. And we also invest in traffic control, because as people know that the traffic when it's in motion is less emit 40% than when it's in idle at the traffic light. And traffic jam is a really problem in Southeast Asia. So we see that AI can help with those things very much. And but we see that if we look at AI at the very beginning, generative AI is once in the lifetime. When investor first see that is and we compare to many other things, it's just an opportunity among so many things. So for now, when we look at AI, it's just AI power things, how we apply AI in this, AI in that. But if you try to invest in generative AI, is too late for now. So we see that within this financial market for the couple of years, AI is a shining star, right? It's pulling on the money back to the ecosystem, back to the startup, thanks to AI. So I must say that with those trends, is help the economy away from another crisis. So in that point, I think it's really important to point it out. And from the view, I totally agree with the other panelists today about those views. But I want to emphasize that maybe before some technology become popular, we sometimes need to consider those things, because for now it's like we just react. Technology is so fast. And normally when early stage investor like us, we jump in, we see the product market fit, we see founder industry fit, and we see if the fund fit into the product. But we cannot see how the community fit, right? We cannot see that for that stage. But after all, after so many development and the technology become proven, there's a chance for other community to jump in when they use that, and there's use case, and then we try to optimize. So like technology, I believe that communities will optimize themselves when they use each technology, including AI. For example, the case of Vietnam, I would like to focus on agriculture. So you see that agriculture has contributed really much into the economy, and also more than 50% of the population of Vietnam is in the agriculture sector. And AI helped them really much in some sector, especially the precise farming. So precision irrigation, precision farming, pest control, fertilizer, things like that. It's helped really much, and apply AI in the sense that infrastructure is not there yet. So we see that most of the people can access to mobile phone. We got the high population, like 70 million of mobile phones actively in the country. So it's a huge number. But when they access to AI-based thing, is unaffordable, right? Uneasy for farmers to afford those things. And when we look at that, it's also about the infrastructure in terms of telecom infrastructure. Is luckily the countries provide quite well in terms of the telecom things. So the signal is quite good. So it's helped. But also, I think the gap here is also about the literacy. Like Ned mentioned, the digital literacy in terms of farmers. For the case of Vietnam, I think it's also something that we need to point out. And a lot of program by UNDP, by many other organizations, try to tackle with that problem. And again, data center. So data center is the key things now for Vietnam. So if we look at the Prime Minister approach, he approached in data center thing, AI, and semiconductor. That's three things that really in the agenda of Vietnam. But for data center, is another thing about energy. For Vietnam, it's uneasy to produce energy from renewable source. So now is a time to consider the renaissance of nuclear energy. We also invest in nuclear energy, SMR, and we see that is a kind of a time to look at those things, because like small modular reactor can help the data center to thrive. So I think everything is linked here, from community, from technology, from early stage investor. But maybe for me, is one takeaway is that we should work together. The people that understand about the community, the people that understand how the thing later on will happen, and the people that can analyze the technology like us, early stage investor. And thanks to this project, you pull ourselves together. Because before that, it's uneasy to work, we from different world. But now we can have conversation like this. And I think it will add a lot of value, because we touch with the technology of AI for very beginning. But, there's not the roles of community back then. But if we know that, there's some community will benefit from that, and they need to adjust from that from the very beginning, we keep an eye on that. And, we can create a lot of value then.
No, thank you for that, and for providing that overview, Tien. And I think like you were saying, or like you concluded with, I think what comes out of this is really the importance of interdisciplinary kind of approaches, of bringing people together from different starting points in some sense in this conversation. And someone who works at a community level cannot be expected to understand the investment landscape, and someone who's working at an investment landscape cannot be expected to understand the community level at a granular level. So we really need to bring these worlds together. Otherwise, there is, I think, a risk, again, going back to the keynote address, there is a risk that we end up with a lot of technologically great use cases, but we may not still end up solving the climate crisis. And thank you for also pointing, I think, in the direction of some of the work that you're doing on new materials. I think that's a really interesting kind of space. When we think about AI, we often think about, crop advisories or disaster tools, etc. But we don't often, I think, enough about the new scientific research that is enabled through AI tools, and now with some of the advances in generative AI as well. So some of the work on new materials that you mentioned is also really crucial. I'm conscious of the time, and I know we only have kind of 6 minutes left. So we did receive a number of kind of questions and comments from people in the audience. So if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to just try and club those questions together with a set of last questions for the panelists as well. So to come back to the panelists, maybe Adi, to start with you, and I'll ask the same question to all our panelists, but try and weave in some of the questions from the audience. Adi, so maybe to start with you, given the kind of vision that you were sharing, what are maybe the 2 or 3 key investments that you think global philanthropy, development organizations who occupy a lot of space in this conversation currently would need to take to help us move closer towards the vision that you were talking about? 2 or 3 key points would be helpful.
Yeah, no, thanks, Urvashi. I think actually just building up on what everyone was saying, right, that I think all of us are acknowledging that technology development doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? There's existing injustices on which it will have to ride, and is that it's a very complex landscape. So so when it comes to philanthropy, I think one very major role is that of civil society. That whatever solutions are coming up, right? Now the market will come up with some solutions, and the market is fine in the sense that things that don't work, they'll automatically get churned out. Something better will hopefully come. But the civil society can play that role of highlighting gaps, highlighting, for example, right, whether agri-tech kind of, right, some kinds of solutions, are they working well or not? Are they harming users, or highlighting, long-term harms that some kinds of things might be exacerbating, that once, digital tools are in the hands, right, some of these problems could get accelerated. So I think, I mean, one, when it comes to what philanthropists and donors can support, I think is about supporting a more alert civil society that can highlight some of these gaps. I think another point that came up was about the need for basically this DPI, digital public infrastructure, digital public good kind of an approach. That basically, the point is that, once some base elements are available, it just makes it easier to build more tools on top of that. So financing some of those things are going to be very, very useful, but then also with the caveat that very often we have seen that digital public goods have actually not helped the public so much, but they've helped entrepreneurs or the private sector a lot more in terms of like expanding to new markets, which they weren't able to expand to, right? But now there's public government funded infrastructure, which they were able to ride on and expand into rural areas and so on. And yeah, I mean, it's expanding the market and people are using those things for whatever reason, easy to use and so on. But in the long term, it might be harming. So I think there's that lens, which is very important to keep in mind, that I think infrastructure is tech infrastructure that enables more community-based stuff to come up is awesome. But what underlying principle through which we're thinking this through, that lens is again very important. And that's again, right, philanthropists through different funding programs, they are probably closer to understanding the communities than potentially, other financing sources. So I think that's also one important thing to keep in mind. Yeah, that's it. Just one minor other point that I think even maybe philanthropy is slightly an arm's length away, but educational institutions also have a great role to play, because it's institutions like ours, the IITs, right, who are ultimately producing the engineers who are building all of these AI tools. And their moral compass, their understanding of the broader perspective in which the broader landscape in which this tech is being used, that is very important. And over here, I would say that educational institutions of today are not doing a good job. We are training people to be very skilled engineers and to code stuff, to build ML models and everything. But I think there's very limited understanding of positives and negatives that tech can unleash. So I think that's again a super important thing to focus on the technologists, right? Because ultimately these technologists are in a powerful position to change the contours. We may be able to influence the government to some extent and so on, but people who are building it, right, then you can think of change happening from the inside.
No, thank you. Thank you for those points. I think also underlining the importance of strategy and principles again, but also the importance of looking at technologies. Often we don't actually look at them as technologies and the kind of culture of technology building and where that gets set, like in educational institutions. So thank you for putting those points on the table. Veerappan, over to you. Any recommendations, suggestions, 2 or 3 ideas that you think are critical for aligning AI with equitable climate transitions and the role of philanthropy and development organizations?
Sure. Very, very loaded question.
You can take any part of it.
Yeah, I'll pick some part of it, right? So I definitely like Adi's comment on higher education and basically, I mean, to be honest, even my own journey, my experience in higher education shaped my decision to actually work in the social development space. So I think that's a very crucial time, right, in which to introduce some of these ideas. But I think from the standpoint, I don't think we have to see, businesses and technology as something separate, right? I think the way I see it is that, philanthropies and foundations and nonprofits, civil society organizations can get involved in technology creation as well. I mean, it need not be the domain of a private sector, totally for-profit endeavor, and especially in new technology areas, which is fairly emerging, right? The barrier to entry is a lot lower than it used to be, right? And so I think we can still not talking about this over here, but we can also build those better tools that we feel need to be there, right? As civil society organizations. And I think that's what I want to put out there, because we are ultimately fighting against embedded power structures in many things that we do, and you cannot replace a system by simply telling, oh, you're doing bad things. Right? How you replace a system is by providing alternatives, and first you supplement, then you supplant, right? And that's how systems change. So I want to basically offer that perspective that we should literally be the change, right, that we want to see.
Thank you. That's a very uplifting way to kind of almost bring this panel to a close. Neth, over to you. What would be your 2, 3 big recommendations for realizing the kind of vision that you've put forth and the role you see technology playing in it?
Yeah, so I think my takeaways and recommendations are actually geared towards like ensuring that AI-based or machine learning-based technology should be grounded, and that they can only be useful to farmers in marginalized areas if they are solidly grounded. There are solidly grounded extension services and local infrastructures that could translate the data generated and information generated by these tools into accessible knowledge that build on local realities, respect capacities, and also build on experiences of communities. Public investment should also focus more in ensuring that agricultural extension services, which is a forgotten field now, there's barely any investment across developing countries in Southeast Asia, in particular on agricultural extension services. But then in order for AI generated information to become relevant decision-making tools for those who have barely any access to this, the digital technologies and also the infrastructures, there's actually a need, to supporting and enabling farmers and agricultural producers and make agricultural extension services an effective vehicle for capacitating farmers, particularly smallholders, subsistence farmers, and agricultural workers. AI and digital technology should not be regarded nor pushed as the default technological solution to problems and challenges in the agricultural sector. Lastly, policies and laws should be geared towards enabling smallholders and subsistence farmers, not just to have access to appropriate AI and digital tools, but equally important is imparting the knowledge, how these technologies operate, who owns them, and the issues that surround them as basis for making critical and informed decision on whether or not to adopt these technologies. The usefulness and relevance of AI and digitalization to smallholders can best be enabled by recognizing, supporting, and incentivizing local and endogenous capacities and innovations to allow marginalized communities to adopt these technologies based on their needs and circumstances. So yeah, those are my takeaways.
Super, thank you. Thank you for those points, and also for kind of drawing attention to the point of kind of indigenous communities, indigenous data. It's something that we didn't get a chance to touch on during this discussion, but we do have a brief on that on the website, as well as a bunch of other information around it. Tien, and finally, to close with you, what would be your kind of top 3 recommendations or suggestions for aligning AI trajectories with positive climate change and the role you see for government, for philanthropy? I mean, we already know that the VC community plays a significant role, but what about the rest of the ecosystem?
Yeah, I must say that the rest of the panel has been in most of the things. For now, what I want to point out is actually it's not about AI, it's about emerging technology upcoming. There's a lot of technology upcoming we cannot name now. So what I suggest is that how about we start it now, working together in terms of philanthropy, nonprofit, and also with ourselves, private sector. We can work together. There's some form of that. There's some particular form like blended finance, for example. It's some way that we can work together at the very beginning, so that we can deal with the misunderstanding, a lot of things that may happen in the near future. But for AI, I think is a kind of mainstream things for now. But there's a lot of it is upcoming, and it's a chance for us to think of something that how about working together in some form, and then we can deal with that before it's become so mainstream, so that we have less time left. So yeah, let's work together.
That's also a very positive way, I think, to bring this discussion to a close. And I think even for us at Digital Futures Lab, that was one of the main learnings coming out of the AI and climate project, was really the need for interdisciplinary collaboration and for breaking the silos. And we do have a couple of projects in the pipeline that hope to do that, and we hope to be able to share that information with all of you also very soon. I know we're over time, so I just want to quickly say thank you to all who participated in this discussion, in particular, Mr. Gill, Deepali, and our expert network. I also want to just take a minute to acknowledge and thank Charu Chadda from the Rockefeller Foundation, who had the initial vision for setting up this network and provided us guidance and support through the project, as well as the rest of the Rockefeller team, Vivian and others who provided feedback on various versions of the report. And finally, last but certainly not least, I also want to acknowledge the effort put in by the DFL team, Donna in particular, who has led much of the research on the project and has really helped kind of stitch this network together. I also want to thank Sasha, Avni, Jayant, Shivranjana, and others who've been working behind the scenes on the design and communication around this project, and any others who I might have forgotten. My thanks and my apologies for my omission. And thank you all, of course, for joining us. We hope you will engage with this resource. We would welcome your feedback on it, on how we can improve, other suggestions, etc. And yes, please do sign up for our newsletter for more updates on this work on AI and climate action. Thank you all very much, and have a very good day or evening. Thank you.